when you think about contango and upward sloping basis, then you say that, well, you do not have to hedge to minimize the risk. You can go on the short side. So, but there is a risk. I mean, this is the market risk you are talking about. This is external risk you are talking about. But you are a big risk to yourself. If you do not acknowledge that, then you'll be throwing good money after the bad. Do you understand what I'm saying? That you are tackling all the time risk generated outside of yourself in the external world, and you try to minimize that. But what happens if it is you who are preventing you to get the best in investments? And that is what we are focusing today. Okay? You have heard the word irrational exuberance. It was a very, very famous 2 words by former Fed chief. And he was saying that the market is basically going to show you irrational exuberance. We all the time believe the market is rational, but time to time it becomes irrational. So if the value of the stock is $50, they will value it at $70. And that's not right or rational investment, rational valuation. It is irrational valuation. And the exuberance is because it is always on the upside. So irrational exuberance happens. So we say that, well, there is more to investment than rational investments. And so after this understanding that, well, irrationality is part of investments, and some people even say that it is predictably irrational because we are human beings. We are predictably, that we will be irrational. And what are those characteristics of irrational behavior? Panic investing, by the way, there are books about what are the biases we have. So far, they documented about 173 biases. I'm not going to deal with them, all of them. I'm just going to deal with a few. And then I will show you how to tackle those biases. Panic investment, you all understand what it means. You have done the CME Group Trading Challenge, right? Did you experience any kind of panic investing at that point?
Yeah, sometimes.
Give me an example.
When like the stock would drop a lot, we would be like eager to just like get rid of it right away before our losses get too large. But we didn't do that every time. I think we only did that like once. So if it was like too low, we just kept it with like hopes, and like analysis that it's going to go up again and maybe minimize our loss.
Any other examples you can give? And Isabella, this is also known as anchoring. I'll come back to it, but later. Yeah. So anyone else that experienced panic investing? Okay. The reason that I put this first is that it is very understood. So you invest with an expectation with EST, right? Whether the EST is greater or less than current, that's a different story. That will determine whether you should take long or short position. But you invested with an EST in mind, and then suddenly you see the things are changing and you are losing money. You get panicky. When you get panicky, sometimes what you do is this, let's say you bought the stock at $50, it's going in a hurry, it is now in $40. You say, my God, I lost 20% of my investment. And however, on the flip side, I see that, well, the stocks are now cheaper. It is $40. Let me double up on that. Now you had initial investments. Let's say you had 10,000 stocks. Now you have added another 5,000 stock with 15,000 stocks in play. 10,000 bought at 50, 5,000 bought at 40. And then you see it's still going down. Now it is at 30. You keep on investing, throwing good money after bad, and suddenly you realize that you have nowhere to go, and you just throw the towel and take a huge, big loss. That's panic investing. So that's, I needed to describe that phenomenon. Anchoring is something like this. I entered the market at $50. And I know, I'm adamant to sell it above 50. So I anchor my investment to 50. And I know people a long time back, not so long time, but it's maybe around 1990s and early 2000, there was a company, and that company is known as Lucent, and everybody thought it's going to go up in a hurry. And people bought Lucent at around 50 or so, and they thought it will go above to 70 and plus. But slowly it was coming down. So people were doing a kind of panic investing, that means doubling up when they were coming down. And then on top of that, they were doing anchoring, that no, we entered at 50, I cannot sell it less than 50. And guess what? Market tumbled, and they had to, when it was 30 or so, people thought that many people advised the investors to get out, but they did not listen. And ultimately, many people have just lost the entire investment. They sold off at 37 cents. So that is another bias, anchoring bias. Now, we see here, we are driven by emotion, largely emotion, not driven by data. So this shift happens because we have two selves. One is the rational self, another is the emotional self. And those of you who know much more about psychology and others can teach me here, but I do not want to go to the deep route. I want to just make this problem very clear, that now there is a shift from data-driven, which is the rational mind, to emotion-driven, which Kahneman, who got the Nobel Prize in economics working from psychology in 2012, he calls the two selves. One self is your, fast self. Another is the slow self. Slow self is the data-driven part. It takes a lot of work to come to a conclusion. On the other hand, fast self, it just takes the decision. Yeah. Do you know the circumstances where you see you take an emotional decision, and emotional decision are a very snap decision? Have you experienced that in your life? You must have been. Everybody did, right? That happens very fast. The calibration happens very quickly. So this transition from data to emotion is not a good thing for investments. So what are the solutions? We are human beings. We will have that self, the biased self. So we have to minimize that biased self. There are two distinct ways that you can solve this. One is the thought-driven. That means you bring another new thought to it and try to solve this panic investing and anchoring. Another is the behavior-driven. That means you change your behavior so that this thing do not play out. So let me elaborate on this. So thought-driven, I give you an example because you guys are adult and you know this. Smoking is bad for your health. Everybody knows that, right? So somebody who is a smoker, he said that he has one thought that, well, yeah, smoking is bad for health, but he has to rationalize it somehow. He sees the data all around. The people who takes or smokes have cancers, and also it complicates other issues in the body. So he finds a data that kind of supports that smoking is not too bad. So he brings a thought to the picture as a form of rationalization and deals with his what is known as cognitive dissonance. He could not reconcile that he is doing smoking, but at the same time, he knows the data does not support him. So he has a dissonance, and he solves the dissonance by bringing in another data set that somehow does not make smoking too bad. So this is, he solves that dissonance problem, cognitive dissonance, because thoughts are cognitive in nature. And so he said, no, it's okay. I'm good. That's one solution. The other solution is the behavior driven, that you change your behavior. And to change your behavior, there have to be some things in place. That means, in the building, nobody smokes. So you have to go out in the cold and to smoke. And that will slowly affect, this behavior would slowly take away from things that are bad for you. So that is in the realm of your social behavior. But what about this panic investing and anchoring? So let me take the case of anchoring. In order to get rid of anchoring, you can invoke many thoughts that, no, we should not do this because this is not logical and so forth. But you can also change your behavior. How do you change your behavior? You say, okay, I will put up stops and limits and forget about it. If it goes through the stops, fine, I'll take the loss. But if I see the market is fast and it goes through the stops very quickly, I will put some stops that will move with the market. So the behavior you are adopting is a due diligence behavior where you put in, while when you put your investment and you're in, you put stops and limits. And that will get rid of anchoring. How do you get rid of panic investments? Then you bring in a group with yourself. And the group will determine your behavior. No, you are doing it. Why are you throwing good money after the bad? So that is another way. Okay, so now when you are you are about to finish your data-driven analysis. So at this point in time, you say, okay, I would like to make sure that I do not have any panic investing decision here. I do not have any anchoring decisions here. Those of you who know much more about other biases, you can bring in that. There are attribution bias, there are affirmative bias, there is illusion of control bias. I am not going to talk any one of them. You can just Google it. You can find out many, many biases that we suffer from. And then you say that in your mindset part, that we make sure that our biases do not affect, and we are taking a behavior-driven approach to it. Thought-driven approach is like, you go into the loop, basically, one loop after the other, without solving anything. So, but then I say, get examples from real life. So in the video on LQD or PowerPoint that you have there, you see how people have dealt with it. Some people go in and they find out the leaders in the world, winners in the world, and find out how they tackle these biases. And in LQD example, they have quoted extensively Phil Jackson because he was the leader in, winner in basketball at two different points in time. And he said that, well, there are examples that you can find out from him, that he used to even not only does the skill-driven thing that we have done in here, but also he made sure that they play in the dark so that they can have feel for each other without have to looking. You do not have the time to look in a high-pressure game. So he used to do that. But even after that, he used to say that before a big game, I make sure that their minds are empty, because mind is an extremely useful thing for us, but it can be a barrier to our success as well. So one of the technique that he used to do is to Zen meditation before he used to tell them to go out. So when they go out, basically their mind is empty. They just go into zone. And they cannot explain how they are performing, because their mind cannot fathom the successes they are having. That's where, those of you, because it happens before your birth, Michael Jordan's famous shrug, you can find it on YouTube. He drops the ball in the basket and he doesn't know why it went. And that's why the famous shrug came in. That is, you make sure that mind doesn't interfere and you are in the zone. So in other words, we say in finance, we say it, that you are with the market. You feel the market. Okay? So your job is, between now and December 1st, is to find some examples. There are lots of winners in the field. I am not pointing out that it has to be from basketball or baseball, or it is also in finance. Do your thing and bring out what they say. With it, they confirm what is being said here. That is, you use the mind, but don't get used by it. Use the mind, but don't get used by it. Okay? By the way, I am recording it, so I'll put this up there after the record. So, any questions so far? You know how nowadays what happens here, we do traditional finance, the finance that we did with you folks, data-based decision making. But then these challenges come to the traditional finance. Why do you make so much fuss about rationality? People are not rational. And they show time after time with data that people are not behaving rationally. In fact, you can claim that they will behave irrationally. So the huge body of knowledge has emerged in the last 25 years. And then there are people, I mean, after Kahneman's work, there are people out there who had been working on it, both economists and finance professors. And they got, last 2 Nobels were given to them. And so behavioral finance has emerged out of it. So BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, and others, nowadays, their investment recommendation happens after they talk to the investor, find out about their psychology. You know, when you talk to people, you can find out what kind of biases they have. And then they put an integrated investment policy statement. In short, they call it IPS, before even they recommend any investments. So what I wanted to introduce to you is this, beyond traditional finance, rational finance, you have to add some element where you have to talk about the psychology. And to find credence to your analysis, bring in some examples. Bring in examples from winners that confirms that. Any questions? Hello?
No questions for me.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so just find out and make sure that you understand this part of it. And all you have to do is that, yeah, I checked my biases, especially I checked these biases, and I have tried through the behavioral approach, not thought-driven approach, behavioral approach, that my behavior would be, like I said, anchoring. To get rid of anchoring, I will use stops and limits. And panic investing is that, well, if I see that I am getting driven by panic, then a group analysis is the best way, because group can make each other aware that, you know what, you are doing some panic investing. Is that good enough for you? Yeah. How many slides you need? I think 2 slides are big enough. But feel free. I mean, if you are not satisfied with 2 slides, add more. But you need to find credence from outside. The leaders are those, they are not only smart, but they can also understand the risk they have inside. So they minimize the risk they have inside. It is not just the smarts. Does it make sense to you at all? Folks? Does it make sense that you have to attend to yourself too? How much risk you bring to bear yourself?
Yes.
Yeah.